GizmoSapiens Show 281. We're going to call this one Humans in the Loop, or for our Ferengi listeners, Humans in the Loop. I'm Chris, and with me today is...
I am Matt.
And today we're going to talk about many things. Uh, age discrimination is still baked into many hiring and promotion decisions, especially in the tech industry. Even as demographic and performance data increasingly show older workers as critical to stability and knowledge transfer. And that's within any industry.
Yeah.
Um, At the same time, the modern digital workplace is creaking under the weight of unreliable, unpatched endpoints and a rush of unmanaged AI tools that sit on top of fragile basics. In Detroit, Ford has quietly admitted that its AI-driven quality systems couldn't replace decades of tacit know-how, and they had to rehire 350 experienced engineers to catch problems and mentor juniors to be able to catch problems. Um, and so, again, we're going to talk about putting humans back in the loop. After this drive of trying to figure out that AI may not be ready for prime time, much less ever ready for prime time.
I've been watching a lot of YouTube lately, and one of my favorite commercials, which I know you pay YouTube
For premium, yeah, so I don't have to ever
to
watch.
not deal with these commercials, but this particular one I found amusing. They're in some sort of manufacturing plant, and this robot arm is just beating the hell out of some widget, and you got these two people in lab coats and hard hats, and they have no idea how to fix it. And the one says to the other, "Well, we need to find an engineer that knows how to program in COBOL." And the other guy's like, "What's COBOL?" You know, and I just laughed the whole thing. This is what we're dealing with.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's kind of funny because and again, it's sensationalism to a large part. Uh, AI is coming for everybody's jobs. Now, don't get me wrong, I use AI. I know you use AI. AI can be it's an automation tool. And I'm going to reiterate, AI should not be called artificial intelligence. It should be called like automated interaction. Um, because LLMs are not these magical things. LLMs are what we call similarity search, if you understand how they're built. And I know I preach on this every time we talk about AI. Um, and it can do some really, really cool things. You can vibe code apps, but if you don't really know what you're doing, is your app secure? Is your app optimized to be fast? Is it,
Does
so
it even work?
yeah, exactly. Well, that was my problem with Codex because I have a vibe coding prompt that I put in, and I expect it's really based on one of my computer science classes in college where the professor, he was not he didn't know Windows or DOS. He worked on Unix systems, and he came into class the first day and he goes, "You automatically fail if I don't type in the exact name of this program from your diskette as you turn it in." You can tell how long ago it was. and and it doesn't execute. It's an automatic failure. If it works, you get an A. If it fails, you get an F.
Okay.
And it had to be named what he had named it in the syllabus because he didn't know. He literally was like a noob. Even though he was a old school Unix guy, he was a noob when it came to Windows and DOS. And but that kind of goes to your COBOL. What's COBOL? You know, and there have been a lot of layoffs, particularly in tech, but I don't think those layoffs are they're laying people off because they really don't have a need for people to do those jobs. I think they're laying them off for economic reasons. Like Oracle's a good example. They've laid off like 60,000 people since January. But why have they laid off that many people? Well, if you go look, and I just read an article on this, there's all this hidden debt, and it's not illegal the way they're reporting it, but between Oracle, Meta, Google, and there's one other company, they have like 1.91 or 71 trillion dollars in debt. But they don't have to report it. It's like you have to like read down in their financial reports to find this. They don't have to report it up front. But that's why you're seeing investors cooling off on the whole AI thing, because they've got all of this debt where they're trying to build data centers and they're trying to secure RAM and video cards and SSDs and compute infrastructure, and then the data center infrastructure that manufacturing just can't keep up with. And the other thing is there, and it's pervasive, is now that we've had AI for a while and we've found places where AI is really useful, and coding is one of those. um, it can be a huge time saver as long as your people know how to actually code, you know? And um, because but there's not, with all this investment and hype into AI, nobody's seeing any returns on it.
Well, that's it's because they're using it wrong.
They are. Well, also they're using it wrong, but they're and everybody is. It's not when the bubble happens, which is what was like, um, or I mean, it's not if the bubble happens, like they were talking about a year and a half ago. They're now talking it's when the bubble happens, because they're already seeing the bubble. And some of these companies that are out there today, I don't think OpenAI is going to survive. That was the fourth company in that list. Their profit to debt ratio is inverted.
Well, again, it's because the the balance sheets, the infrastructure cost is hidden. It's I mean it.
Well, and you have companies doing weird things too, like Nvidia. Nvidia is investing in, we're going to give you $2 billion, Mr. Hyperscaler, to, because we're investing in you. And then, but the agreement is that hyperscaler is then buying $2 billion worth of Nvidia hardware to put in their environment. And then the next agreement is Nvidia is now renting back the capacity of the $2 billion. That's funny money. and, and so, we're starting to see investor lawsuits and all kinds of stuff, because it's like, okay, to make it look like you're profitable, you've been doing this, but the reality of it is it's been your money the whole, or it's my money as the investor the whole time.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, they're not getting a return on their investment. They're not, the stock prices are not going up because people have figured out that I'm not investing in this. This is going to crash here soon, and it's probably it might not be as dramatic a crash in the sense that, like, when the dot-com bubble burst and overnight, companies just went away. There may be this, like, downhill slope, whereas companies dwindle away. But from an economic standpoint, there are companies that today, are going to be valued pre-IPO at this, that are going to be worth zero or negative numbers the next day.
Well, in the end, I think this is going to be one of those areas of business that once there's one or two dominant
Well,
players,
that's the other thing.
that the
You're,
rest will thin out, and we'll actually have
but that's exactly
technology that's reliable
and
and does
that's exactly
what's
what's
promised
gonna. I mean, but that happens, in the
in any
in
industry.
any industry. It's the wild, wild west. When a good idea happens, then we get 40 companies who are working on that idea, and over the next 20 years or so, it dwindles down, and you have two or three big players in that market, and that's it. And we've watched it in the tech industry over and over. I mean, think of how many players, and not only in individual components. Like, if there's a book by Clayton Christensen called The Innovator's Dilemma. It's one of the best books, business books around the technology I think I've ever read, and I will always refer to it. But the beginning, probably the first two-thirds of the book, is about the hard drive industry. And as computer technology changed and hard drives got got smaller, because computers got smaller and became the dominant part of the industry, companies who supplied the bigger drives, and we've seen that. And I mean, if he wanted to write a new version of the book, he could take that to the SSD.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, it's innovate or die.
yeah, and the companies who died were the companies who weren't able to transition for one reason or another from the industry that they were working into, where the industry was going. And that's the way AI is going to be. So it's kind of funny, when we talk about diversity and inclusion, and companies doing this acknowledgement of it, diversity and inclusion. um, what we're finding is that, particularly, in job studies from the labor department and job studies from, um, from independent uh, research institutions, they're finding that older workers are routinely sidelined during hiring, layoffs, and promotion decisions.
Correct.
And even though they bring the institutional knowledge, now, and many times they're the ones who have the strongest performances, because again, you're bringing new people in who have none of that. They cannot perform.
Well, you have years and years of experience and merit,
Yeah,
whereas what a younger worker brings to it is feelings.
correct. Well, and it's funny because, going back to talking about, uh from our last episode, the the population is declining. With that population, employers can no longer afford to sideline your experienced workers,
Sure, because then what you end up is a robot beating the hell out of a widget
and
and no one can fix it.
nobody knows COBOL.
Yeah.
Yeah. um because because um and I mean, I've watched this. My dad actually, uh almost started another company. He was going to call it geriatric engineering, and it was all, people 50 plus, engineers as consultants, because they were the ones, back in the late 90s and early 2000s and mid 2000s, who are all being let go. And I understand that, from a company perspective, um you get bean counters who are looking at it from a numbers only, and they're like, well, if we get rid of a number of these workers, um we're getting rid of high salaries, and we can replace them with somebody who
With
on paper has the same qualifications. um
But the best part about that is that they're demanding the higher salaries from jump.
Dunk, yeah.
So are you really saving that money?
They're not saving any money. That's
No.
why executives, and you have golden parachutes. I mean, I don't know how many moronic people who were made VPs at companies that I've worked with or worked for, who were let go, and it was like, yeah, letting him go is not like letting me go. If you let me go, you're going to pay me, you know, maybe a couple years salary and pension for the 10 or 15 years I've been at the company. You let him go, he's getting like $4.5 million as his severance package. We call them golden parachutes. He didn't Theoretically, he doesn't have to work for the rest of his life, you know.
And probably won't. Mainly because he didn't work while he
He
was
was
at
there.
there.
Exactly. And the other thing is there's this thing that happens too, is that if you get to particularly at a larger corporation, you get to a VP title and you're terrible. And and again, politics plays in here. So they will go like, you need to retire, find another job or whatever. We're going to give you a quarter to get it done. If not, we will fire you.
Well, they call that an exit strategy.
Yeah. And and so then these same VPs, I worked for a VP who ripped my position, and I was the most senior engineer they had. And at the time, because I had spent 13 years at this company and I had put a lot of sweat equity in building it, um, I was a little hurt, uh, but I also realized that companies have no loyalty to their employees today. And he got rid of me for a political reason because I would tell him, this is stupid. This is not what we should be doing." And I wouldn't say it in a bad. Yeah, I actually didn't never said it in such a blunt way as I just did now. But that's what my brain was thinking, and he probably read it on my face. And and he found an opportune moment that he could riff my position, and within 3 months they had gotten rid of him.
Yeah.
You know, and he went to another company as a senior VP, and that company got rid of him within 6 months. He went to another company as an executive VP, a senior executive VP, and that company went out of business, and he was part of that. So he was failing upward.
Which is what a lot of these guys
Tend to do.
do. I mean, when the thing that they bring to the job is charisma,
He didn't even bring charisma. It was his what he brought to the job was a good old boy network.
well, then
And
there's
there,
that.
and that's the thing is, in a lot of these senior executives in tech companies, in other industries, there's a good old boys network, because the senior executive at this company was a junior executive at this company, and so he recommends the guy this guy over here who he used to work for, or who used to work for him, to come over and take this other senior executive job, and it's a good old boy system, and they protect each other, and that's why there's exit strategies and golden parachutes, and you know the whole idea of golden parachute is not actually for that. It's actually to protect somebody who is like a CEO or president of a company, as insurance for giving it a try to increase a company who the board has decided needs new leadership because they're not making enough money, not making any money, whatever. But golden parachutes have started to extend down beyond the CEO and president roles.
Well,
And golden parachute makes sense in those places because these guys aren't working 9 to 5, 40 hours a week. They're working, 100 hours a week and flying all over the world. And,
I get it. If you can get that negotiated into your deal,
well,
so
yes.
much the better.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
I mean, but these are the things that are causing companies that would otherwise survive to ultimately fail because they have to have that money set aside, so they can't then invest it in R&D or the next innovation. They have to hang on to that money so that they can
Yeah.
mitigate the risk of having to offboard a
Well,
incompetent
the
senior
the
VP or
thing is
whatever.
is is a lot of times, particularly at the CEO and president roles in a company, again, the you know the golden parachute is really part of the compensation package,
It is.
and because they're going to be giving a whole lot of time. Also, it is one of these things where sometimes you're hiring them up front, just like a superintendent gets hired for a school district, and sometimes they're brought in to be the like what was the guy at HP? He from Dayton. Uh,
Yeah, I forget his name.
Mark. Can't remember his last name, but because he lived over by me.
Really?
Yeah. But he was brought in as a cutter. He was known. He was a financial guy, brought in as CEO of HP before HP Inc. and HP Enterprise
Yeah.
diverged. And he was brought in as color, and he was only supposed to be there for a certain amount of time. That's why he was at NCR. He helped NCR divest a whole bunch of assets and people before they moved from Dayton to Atlanta, because that's where he had been previously. And he was only at NCR for like a 3 or 4 year period. That was the whole point of him, and that was part of his agreement at both the NCR and at HP. And he came in and he was after Carly Fiorini,
Hmm.
and his job was, hey, we've gotten too big and too bloated. We've made a lot of acquisitions that we shouldn't have made. Let's start cutting. And that was his job. And he was there for, I think, 3 or 4 years. And the board knew that, hey, we've got it under control. Our expenses, our income to debt ratio is right. Now it's time to bring somebody in who's a builder. And they do that same thing with superintendents and school districts. We're having we either have a fundraiser, or we have a maintainer, or we have a cutter. We
Yeah.
have too many teachers and not enough students, so we need to figure out what's our exit strategy. And part of the reason they do that, and the expectation is you're only going to be here a couple years, is because then you're the scapegoat for the
Yeah.
company
For the next
PR
guy.
team, and
Yeah.
that's why they get golden parachutes,
Yeah.
because you're the scapegoat. We're going to compensate you for taking the blame for us.
And if the escape is bad enough, dude may not be able to find another job.
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
which is why they get these golden parachutes that are enough
And
money that they don't have to go work again.
exactly. Exactly. So let's kind of move on to the next thing. So
Okay.
there's an Omnissa study uh, called "The State of the Digital Workplace," and it paints a really bleak picture of enterprise tech. PCs and endpoints, and they literally kind of they basically say that these enterprise systems that we rely on for doing business, and it's not just in the United States, it's worldwide, are held together with spit and duct tape. And they say the findings highlight endpoints that are unreliable, poorly patched, and often run outdated or unencrypted software, such as AI tools or SaaS applications that proliferate on top of these endpoints. And the big thing about this report is that they're warning that adding layering AI and automation onto this brittle foundation is going to break your business, because all business today, like it is anywhere, is primarily digital. Nobody's writing memos and pushing papers, and even in the 80s, they quit buying IBM Selectrics and started buying IBM, you know PS1s, so that they could transition from uh typewriters to word processing. And yeah, they were printing those reports at that time, but at this point, they're not printing those reports. they're
No, it's
they're
going to
say
a dashboard on a website somewhere.
Yeah,
That's fair.
means, you know and it also has limited visibility into what the users are doing too. um Now, the funny thing is the Omnissa asked how much of this is where IT is unfunded. And I don't think IT is unfunded, because it's been
Unfunded or underfunded?
underfunded.
Okay, that's a
And
fair
I don't
question.
think it's underfunded, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
That's my personal opinion. Working with primarily our federal customers, but we do have some commercial customers. I think they're well funded. Um, but I think there is reticence to update systems that should be updated in a timely manner, because companies have invested in the technology and not the people. So one, they don't have people to plan and execute doing these things so that it's as least painless as possible. Uh,
Well, now you're talking about legacy systems, and
I'm legacy systems are part of this, but I'm even talking about lists like not enough people to manage, like replacing endpoints and making sure that all the software is uh updated. Because the thing that, like any IT, is an engineering function, and the companies and government agencies who are really successful with IT are the ones who treat IT as an engineering function, meaning that you have a systems engineering group, and the systems engineering group is to look at all your systems, make sure that they're being updated in a timely manner, determining what changes to the architecture and technology should be added, because like anything, and particularly in the digital world, technology, if you have technology that is greater than 10 years old, it's a legacy system at that point, because it's likely that it has limited or no support.
But legacy systems have a tendency to be more reliable. Plus, you don't have
More,
the
yeah, but here's the thing.
plus you don't have to
They
re-educate your entire workforce on a regular basis on how to use the system.
So legacy systems tend to be more reliable in the sense that, like, if you're running an application on a mainframe, mainframes are designed, or a tandem nonstop, they're designed to be more robust and reliable. But if you do not have support, there's no software updates, uh, all of your data is now in the world to be ready to be, particularly now in the world of AI, it's just being ready to be exploited. And we're finding that, and that's part of the reason Omnissa did this report, is that if you look at the over the last 2 years, the number of ransomware attacks that have happened versus the previous 10 years. And I mean, it's not like ransomware is new, but AI is helping uh, hackers string together uh, vulnerabilities into usable hacks on mainly on legacy systems. And the thing is, like, when you talk about mainframe, and you talk about uh, tandem nonstops, and even older, monolithic Unix systems, that like AS400 and stuff. I mean, because there's a lot of companies, the AS400, which is also an IBM product, is their has been their inventory control system for manufacturing for 3 or 4 decades. And yes, are those expensive to replace? And yes, does it take a lot of enablement to move them to a modern system? Um, but it's not just replacing legacy systems. It's what can we put in place around these legacy systems to protect them better so we can continue to use them.
Well,
But going
that's
back
the
to that,
smarter issue.
but
Like,
but like I was saying, you really should have a systems engineering group who are the architects, looking at your existing systems, what needs to be added because there's new technology and capabilities, what needs to be replaced. You need a platform engineering group who are the guys that the system engineers, when they come up with the plan, go execute this plan. And then you have your sysadmin group who does all the day-to-day crap, put the patch on, take the patch off, because somebody vibe coded that patch. It's not good. But all the user, and typically, this is what I find. Even though you have, uh, so in federal government agencies, what I find is that you have, and it's new. It's like it's only maybe 4 or 5 years old in federal agencies, but you have that structure of a system engineering group and uh, a platform engineering group, and then a sysadmin group. What you the problem is I find is that because of the bureaucracy of the federal government, the system engineering group isn't actually system engineering. Their administration, and they're filing paperwork. You have one or two guys who are senior architects who are doing all of the systems engineering for both hardware and software. You have a platform engineering group who are firefighters who are responding to the issues that are either upfront the most, or the system is down and it has to be fixed. And then you have a sysadmin group who is doing a lot of the day-to-day stuff, but they're hampered by the bureaucracy of getting, so things aren't getting patched in a timely manner, or and also the federal government has this problem of where they will have contracts for managing certain aspects of their IT infrastructure. And you have one group who does like networking, and one group who does like data center infrastructure, in the sense of data center server storage. uh, and then you have another group who is data center infrastructure, who is power cooling and racks. And so, because they're not all one group and they're not treated as one group, there's stumbling blocks and interaction and everything else. And then they all have uh different buckets of money to pay for it. On the commercial side, what I've seen in our commercial customers is you have one group that does it all, but they spend the majority of their time doing day-to-day sysadmin tasks, patching systems. So that comes into the legacy systems never get looked at because they're concerned with
Well, it worked.
is compliance. Well, yeah, but the problem is particularly in today's age, uh, if it ain't broke, don't fix it is not a good answer. If it ain't broke, don't fix it can be the right answer, but it may not be. And so sometimes you have to have a little pain to ensure that what you're doing, because again, it comes down to trust and reliability, and anymore because of compliance. Like if you're doing business with the federal government, you have CMMC compliance. Um, if you get hacked, that's a huge legal liability. Because you might have federal government data that you have to do your job for the government or to do your job for working with the government. Uh, you are now liable for, and so now you know you got a $30 million lawsuit where the DOJ is coming after you because it was your fault or it appears to be your fault, and you have to defend yourself, which, I mean, DOJ comes after you, you're going to spend, as a company, you spend a minimum of $2 or $3 million just defending yourself initially. That might not be the resolution of what's going on. So, I don't believe that. Um,
Well, how often in your case do you have the ability to influence whether or not the federal customer maintains a legacy system or not?
it depends on the customer because being a consulting engineer, my contracts with them are different. And because of that, with some customers, because of what they ask me to do, I'm I act in a capacity and where I am like one of them, and I act as a senior architect, but a senior architect who touches all the people. So I can influence a lot of whether, and I've got multiple examples. I can't talk about them because of the
Well,
nature
yeah,
of
naturally.
the work, but I've got multiple examples where that has certainly been the case. Like they ran a legacy system so long that they actually lost important National Archives data because the system could, once it died, uh, no, there was no expertise, and the company who built it no longer existed, and nobody would touch it to try to fix it because nobody had source code, nobody had anything.
So the robot beats the hell out of a widget,
You got
and
it.
no one knows how to program in COBOL.
Correct.
I get you.
In other customers, it's these are the requirements we have. How would you architect it, and what are the products you would put in place to make this work? you know
Well, my interest in that is like figuring out where the liability comes from and why it's
well, the
why
one.
it's on the contractor rather than
Yeah.
the agency or
Well,
whatever.
in the case of some of these, like where I'm deeper into it, you know the agency takes onus for that. um but like in some of my commercial customers, um their in-house IT team is the one who takes the when things happen, they're the ones who take the blame.
Well, I mean,
And
ultimately, they're the ones who are the decision makers. That's the
but the funny thing is there's a disconnect. You have the guy who's the CIO who technically controls that group, But the reality of it is he sits up in the C-suite in these commercial companies, and he doesn't interact very often with the actual head of IT. And he's a lot of times I've found that commercial CIOs, they're either security focused, and so when they take the budget, the IT budget that they're funded with, they spend all their money wrapped around uh, either compliance or because it costs a lot of money to be compliant. Like I have
Absolutely.
one commercial customer whose primary customer is also the federal government, and so they're all wrapped around CMMC compliance. And also how big your company is, how much infrastructure, how much what is the nature of your business with the federal government determines the level of compliance, the level of CMMC compliance. And they're fairly near the top where they have to make major investments in infrastructure to support this. But so they're neglecting a lot of the other things that are fragile in their environment to support this compliance. But I've had other ones who a lot of times the CIO is because they're you'll see this on LinkedIn. There's a whole bunch of memes about it and stuff, but you see what is the difference between being a director in IT and the CIO. And a lot of times being the director of IT is you're really the COO of IT. You're the chief operating officer of IT. You're running the day-to-day operations, you're running the business, but the CIO is a financial guy, and I that's where I encounter more often than not because they run a line of business because IT is now a line of business. And they look at it from a bean counter point of view, and they're like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, because I don't want to. What's the cost to fit, to do this?
Yeah.
But sometimes that pain is, you know, has to be taken, and a lot of times your director of IT is heads down trying to keep it operating, and if they're good and they have a good team, despite the fact that this system should be fixed, they're keeping it going until something super catastrophic happens. It's a weird thing. So as we mentioned in the intro, Ford rolled out an automatic quality control system built with AI tools, and the whole idea is it was supposed to capture expert knowledge and and in practice, the systems missed so many defects and failed to encode uh, the the intuitive uh, feelings based expertise that all these veteran engineers had built over decades. Again, in this case, that feel uh, is more intuition, as in I can't articulate it. It's kind of like when we talked about Star Trek a couple episodes ago. Pike had this intuition; he couldn't articulate it at the moment, but based on experience and his subconscious processing all the information, it feels like magic,
Uh,
but a lot of times it's really intuitive knowledge that says, oh, I've seen this before, this
Yeah,
is the problem, and this is not going to fix that issue, or there's something still not right about what we're seeing. And
which is why I drive our IT team crazy. I've worked with our systems long enough that I know when something bad is either happening or
about to
about to
happen.
happen, and I'll report it, and they're gonna be like, "Well, you're crazy, dude. Go away." And then within 24, 48 hours, they're like, "Here's a major problem. We need to fix this whole thing." And
Well, the funny thing is, so Ford did that, implemented it 3 years ago, and also part of it was driven by COVID.
yeah,
They didn't know how long COVID was going to be. Let's automate more of this process so that we can still manufacture. And after 3 years, uh, they have rehired 350 experienced engineers that they let go, uh, and they're directly mentoring younger staff uh, to fix this quality issue. But it's kind of funny. It's like I say, artificial intelligence or AI shouldn't be called uh, artificial intelligence because the one thing it can't do is humans can see patterns that are not exact but are similar. And so when we talk about similarity search, a lot of that intuition is this looks like another pattern, but it's not exactly like that pattern. And they're able, we're able to see things. And then there's also the judgment, the reasoning, the real reasoning behind stuff that AI really does not have. They make AI look like when you type Claude, it goes thinking, 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 reasoning, reasoning. It's not.
It's I've heard diplomacy referred to as uh, hitting uh, petting a rabid dog long enough to where you can find a rock.
Yeah,
And that's kind of what AI is doing here.
yeah, exactly. Well, the funny thing is I've said this before. The quantitative data uh, on productivity, error rates, project outcomes is causing companies to realize that both ageism and AI um, are not solutions to the problem. They need to keep experienced engineers as long as they're willing to work. And in some industries that's happened. I worked with a guy who was, Lord, he was close to 80 years old down at Raytheon E Systems in Dallas because he had developed one of the major radar systems for for the Army for national defense, and he owned patents and stuff and still understood them. He was really sharp, but he didn't really have a job at Raytheon because it wasn't like they were building more of these or they had him in research. So he ran the demo lab, where they were evaluating new technologies, but they still needed his expertise, so they kept him there. And you do find that in some government agencies. You'll find people who they like, in their 20s helped build these systems, for national defense, and nobody has the expertise. And some of these guys were like the junior engineers, but just because they're the only ones left, they're the only ones with expertise on these systems, and so they have kept them around because all of their peers have passed. So as we circle the wagon, um, you know, if your systems are unreliable, uh, whether it's your just regular IT infrastructure, or in the case of Ford, their quality control system, um, what we're seeing is something that everybody has said, since the beginning of OpenAI, you know, throwing a product out there, which is, you got to have a human in the loop. And the funny thing is the AI companies are kind of saying the opposite of that. They're like, no, 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 you build these agents and the agents will then do this work for you. Well, the problem is that the advantage of automation and why automation works in stuff like manufacturing is because I need the same thing done over and over and over and over again the exact same way. And a lot of AI today can't do the same thing over and over and over and over again the exact same way. And one of the things, again, the Ford example proves that, is that if things are just slightly different, a human can recognize that, oh, I just need to treat this the exact same way. But an AI is like, this isn't it, reject.
Well, not only that, but like you can tell an AI that you want an output done a certain way, and you'll get it the first time, and you will never get that same output, the same format ever again.
Yep.
Which,
I mean, the other thing that's hurting AI today is they're finally figuring out the cost of AI. And companies are like, am I getting, shareholders are like, money, 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 money.
where's my ROI?
Yeah. And so companies are looking at it and they're going, are we getting any productivity gains by investing in AI versus not investing in AI? And a lot of them are finding the answer is no. And, because a lot of companies had jumped into the AI bandwagon, just like they jumped in the cloud bandwagon. Um, and, so there is an adage that has come around. And that adage is, if your AI roadmap doesn't include budget and authority for humans who keep things running, you don't have a roadmap, you have a marketing deck. And that marketing deck might have been hallucinated by AI. That's the Chris corollary.
I'm friends with a guy who is one of those, I'll call him an AI tech bro, but he's really a marketing guy. And like he's so into the AI, like if your business is not doing AI, you're gonna die. And I'm just like, dude, that bubble is gonna burst, and you're gonna be one of the first people that are like, I'm sorry, I over promised.
Over promised and under delivered.
And at that point, it's too late. You've killed more businesses than you saved with it.
Yep, absolutely. Well, let us know what you think. Is AI the savior or the bane of humanity? Uh, are you worried about your job, or do you think AI can help you be more successful in your job? Give us some feedback. Send it to gizmosapiens@gmail.com. That's GizmoSapiens@gmail.com. Or make a comment on this episode 281, at our website, www.gizmosapiens.com. And we will see you on the digital flip side.
You've been listening to Gizmo Sapiens, a technology and entertainment podcast. You can reach us at our email address at gizmosapiens@gmail.com. That's GizmoSapiens@gmail.com. We'd really love to hear from you, and we'll see you next week from the digital flip side.